Well, good morning. My name is David Vann. I'll be your instructor. We're going to talk about slip, trips, and falls. We're going to talk about identification and prevention, basically hazard prevention for slip, trips, and falls. Cost of slip, trips, and falls will be one of our objectives. Obviously, there's a cost to the employee. Obviously, they get hurt. They're going to have pain. They're going to have suffering. They have rehabilitation, possibly out of work. The employer obviously was going to have an employee that they got to pay for, and plus they got to try to replace them with somebody. So those are some of the things we have to think of. I want to talk about some definitions. What is a slip? What is a fall? Some of the causes and what kind of things put us at risk for slips, trips, and falls. And later, the last part, we'll talk about prevention and minimization. Slip, trips, and falls can happen anywhere. It can happen in here. It can happen as you're coming in on the steps. It can happen in your home. It can pretty much happen anywhere. The trips usually result in some sort of a fall, and it may be something that you catch yourself before you fall, or it may be something that you go and strike something hard, you fall to the lower level and get seriously injured. It certainly can lead to long-term disability. It may be a short-term disability, like you're on crutches for a while, or you have a broken arm. Hopefully you'll come out of that and get full range of motion and everything once it's done. But there's something called physical therapy that ends up happening in there, and if you're like me, that's probably not very pleasant. It happens. It can lead to death, possibly, particularly if someone hits their head or has a serious contusion somewhere and, creates blood clots. They may not survive. Certainly, the cost to the worker and employer can be quite substantial. To the employer, obviously, the loss of productivity in business. The employee is injured, is no longer able to work. So they have to either backfill that position with someone that have to work some overtime to cover. We hire temporary. Temporary is not very adept at the job yet, so there's a lot of training, bringing them up to speed type situations. So at that point, that costs money. That time in training and getting somebody ready to take a position is a situation. Obviously, if the employer, whether it be the city of Salisbury or Lance Crackers or whoever, the more injuries, the more insurance that gets used, the higher the premiums are. Most cities and a lot of companies are self-insured up to a fairly high amount of money, but above that means they have to bring on some insurance, and that still means money is going out, okay? And again, we talked about what it's going to take to train somebody to be able to take the position that's being vacated by the one that's injured, okay? The cost to the worker is lost wages and out-of-pocket expenses. And if you're on workers' compensation, we're still talking 2/3 of your salary, so there's still a third there that's not available. You may have some plans or something to help offset some of that, but again, that could be some out of pocket for you. Pain. Pain is your deal. I can't tell how bad you're hurting. You can tell me, but I don't know. You say, what's your pain threshold in a 1 to 5? It's a 7. Okay. You're a little different than me. I don't think it's that bad. Okay, but that's not me. Again, like I said, temporary disability. You may have some sort of casts or things like that. You have to wear immobilization devices if it's your knee or something, or maybe a corset to keep your back straight. Those are temporary. Hopefully they go away and you can get some range of motion. But there may be some permanent disability, and that's sad. Something you could do before the injury you can't do after you recover. That could certainly have a bearing on your quality of life. Also causes depression because you're not able to do that. Some people get really depressed enough to where they say, I'm done. And we know that goes there. Sometimes people die because of the injuries. Slip, trips, and falls make up a majority of general industry accidents. The number one leading cause of death in the workplace are transportation accidents or motor vehicle. So number one. Number two, slip, trips, and falls. It's number two on the hit parade. So 15% of accidental deaths, unfortunately, we've had an uptick in the amount of fatalities in the workplace in the last couple of years. So it's around 5,000 people. That's a lot. So you figure 15%, it's about 750 people die from slip, trips, and falls every year. It's one of the most frequently reported injuries, about 25% of all reported claims each year. And from my previous experience in a factory, usually there was one or two recordables every year that were due to somebody slipping, tripping, or falling. So it's there, that's real. Over 70% of all disabling occupational injuries result from falls. And again, most of these things could have been prevented. And that's what we're kind of after today. What are some of the injuries? Sprains and strains, bruises and contusions, broken bones or fractures, abrasions, lacerations, which are cuts. And these can be in various levels of complexity and various levels can cause various levels of disability too, for that matter. Injury sites, lower extremities, your knee, your ankle, and/or your foot, wrist or elbow, your back or your shoulder, your hip, and your head. And when we fall, we're typically we're top heavy, so we tend to fall towards our head and our shoulders. So a lot of times the more severe injuries are the ones that occur to the head, obviously. So a definition, what is a slip? It's when we have too little friction or traction between the feet and the footwear and the walking and working surface, usually resulting in a loss of balance. See, some of the pictures I'm going to show in here today have to deal with meat packing. You can see all this nasty stuff over here. That's grease and what they call offal. You can see it's wet. The guy standing on a ladder that's actually not being used properly. It's leaning up against something rather than being extended out. So again, that can create a serious issue for slip, trips, and falls. A trip is when the foot or lower leg hits an object and the upper body continues moving, resulting in a loss of balance. Stepping down to the lower surface and losing your balance is what happens when we trip. Obviously, we have both the pipe going across here plus the hoses and stuff that this gentleman's carrying can certainly create a trip hazard. So falls occur when we're too far off our center of balance. Falls at the same level is one of the types when we're walking surface, like we're walking in here and I trip over the edge of that chair and I fall to the ground. Hopefully that's not going to be a serious injury, but it could be. Or falls to a lower level where I step over and I fall to something that may be a foot or two below, or it could be several feet, depending on what type of opening I have there. And we'll go over some of that as we move through here. Some of the causes of slips would be wet product or spills on smooth floors or walking surfaces, such as water, mud, grease, oil, food, offal, blood. Offal is animal fats. That's what you see in that picture right there. That's from a meat packing plant. A lot of these pictures came from a meat packing plant, which is kind of an extreme case, but it certainly illustrates where there's potential for slip, trips, and falls. Other things that could be dry product or spills making walkway surfaces slippery. Got a nice hardwood floor here. It's probably a laminate of some kind. If I put some powder or dust on there, it's going to be just as slick as if I went and had ice out there on the parking lot. So dust and powders, any types of granules or anything that can slide that I could step on could be a problem. Plastic wrapping. In my previous experience, we had a lot of warehouses. In the warehousing, we had a lot of shrink wrap, and that shrink wrap gets on the floor. If you step on it, you can slip and fall easily. And one of the things I found in my house was the dryer sheets. They go in with a wash when you dry the clothes, and you pull the clothes out and you don't notice, and it's on the floor. And I have tile floor in my laundry room. You know, I did one of those, looked like I was trying out for cheerleading, and I really didn't intend on that, but I didn't get hurt, but I was a little sore. Muscles moved that weren't supposed to. Some other causes of highly polished floors can be slick even when they're dry. Concrete, marble, ceramic tiles. Even though a lot of the tiles you buy these days have a kind of a rough surface on them, people put different things to make them shiny, and when they do, makes them slick. Freshly waxed surfaces, linoleum, like hallways in the schoolhouse and stuff like that, they can certainly be slick. Transition, there's one thing I noticed about the transition here. It's pretty much seamless. You can't even tell it between the carpet and its wood surface. So that's good, but sometimes you find it's raised just a little bit, and a half an inch is just enough to catch your toe and cause you to trip, okay? Sloped walking surfaces, another cause of slips. Loose, unanchored rugs or mats, or what we used to call throw rugs. If it's on something like that, you can certainly scoot on it. Loose floorboards or shifting tiles. Wet, muddy, or greasy shoes. Ramps and gang plants without skid or slip-resistant surfaces. Sometimes with those dock boards and dock plates, and we'll talk about them a little bit later, if you run over them enough with a lift truck, they'll get smooth. You know, it had a nice edge on it, and that gets smooth, and it gets wet, now it's slick. Dock boards and dock plates, platforms, sidewalk and road covers. You may put a piece of metal over an opening in a sidewalk, and they don't intend on, and sometimes it's intended for people to walk on it, because it may be semi-temporary until we can get enough stuff to fill in underneath or whatever needs to happen. But again, they can be slick. People getting on and off of equipment. You climb onto a piece of equipment just like you climb a ladder. You use 3 points of contact. You put both feet on there, and you got a handhold, and you climb up in there. You keep that done. I had a client that had a gentleman in their workplace that decided he wanted to swing off of that lift truck, so he grabs the handle and swings over, and when he hits the floor, you can see his knee buckle. Torn ACL. Just for simply getting off a lift truck. That's not good. Climbing ladders, again, 3 points of contact. Loose or irregular surfaces such as gravel. Sloped, uneven, or muddy terrain. Weather hazards. You guys may be facing a little ice this weekend. That's going to make for some very serious walking and or driving in those situations. Leaves, pine needles, and other plant debris, whether it's wet or dry, if it's on a surface, can make it slippery. Causes of trips, uncovered hoses, cables, wires, or extension cords across aisles or walkways. You know, they make these nice little covers if you have to run an extension cord across a walkway. To make these nice little covers you can put on them so that they're not exposed. But if you don't have that, you can always get duct tape or something like that and tape it down. So you may touch it, but it won't be loose enough to grab your foot and cause you to trip. Clutter, obstacles in the aisleways, walkway, and work areas. And we'll see some pictures of a couple of things like that. Open cabinet, file, or desk drawers and doors. Special people leave those things open like that. You walk by and you trip and fall over that. Changes in elevation or levels, where we have unmarked steps or ramps, rumpled or rolled up carpets or mats, or carpets with curled edges, irregularities in walking surfaces, thresholds or gaps. Typically, you don't see a lot of thresholds inside of a building anymore, but anytime it goes from the inside to the outside, typically there's a threshold, and that's to possibly keep water and stuff from running inside the building. But they can certainly create a tripping hazard. And obviously, if you have missing tiles or bricks where there's any type of an opening, 2 inches by 2 inches is enough to cause you to trip. So be careful if you see those. Damaged steps. We'll have another picture or two of steps. If they're non-uniform or improper or irregular shapes, whether it goes tall to short or short to tall, width is a little different, height's a little different, all of those can certainly create a tripping situation. That's the reason why OSHA, when they go out, if they see any irregular stairs, they start measuring, and if they're not uniform, they can write a citation for it. And it's also in the building code how these steps are supposed to be constructed. So usually there's 2 ways they can go after it. Some other causes of trips will be debris, accumulated waste materials, trailing cables, pallets, tools, and gangways, objects protruding from walking surfaces, uneven surfaces, sidewalk and curb drops, speed bumps, tire bumpers, wheelchair ramps and curbs, and driveways. There's a lot of different things out there that can cause a trip. Environmental situation we have can increase the risk of trips and slips. It's kind of hard to see in this particular photo, but you notice that it looks like there's a fog in there, and that's from all the mist and everything from the extremely hot water and all that activities that are going on. Again, this is in meat packing. But that can create a situation where you don't have good visibility. The lighting's not going to be very good in that kind of situation. Or you could have too much lighting and have a glare. So you're squinting, you're trying to see properly. Not being able to see where you're walking certainly is a huge risk of trips and falls. Shadows, bulky PPE, which might include your boots or your shoes, but you may have to be wearing something that doesn't fit well and you feel like the Michelin Man when you're walking around. Excessive noise or temperature, fog or misty conditions. Again, poor housekeeping. I use the term, your mama don't work here, so pick up after yourself. Improper cleaning methods and products. Inadequate or missing signage. Human factors increase the risk of trips and slips. I know I'm getting old and my eyesight's not the way it was, but I haven't had good eyesight since I was 12, so I've learned to live with it. So good glasses and good having your go to see the eye doctor, make sure you can see good, and your perception, they can check all of that. Certainly your age has a lot to do with eyesight. It also has to do with your gait, how you walk. You tend to get older, you tend to drag your feet a little more, which certainly can lead to more trips and slips. Your physical condition and fatigue, stresses or illnesses can create issues. Certain medications, use of alcohol and drugs, whether it's legal or illegal, can certainly cause your inability to your motor skills get diminished, which could lead to a trip or a slip. Okay. Carrying or moving cumbersome objects or simply too many objects at one time. You see the illustration of this gentleman over here carrying the boxes. Can he see where he's going? So what should happen in this case? Carry less and make additional trip, right? Or use a hand truck or get somebody to help him, right? Good. Not paying attention to surroundings or walking distracted. We don't ever have issues with anybody as far as looking at these things when they're walking around, do we?
Much less driving.
Well, yeah. There was a video out, it's been a number of years ago, about this lady. She was in a mall and she was looking at her phone and wasn't paying attention, not being distracted by the phone, and tumbled into a fountain. She ended up suing the mall because they put that video out there for everybody to see. She ended up suing the mall. So she ended up getting a settlement from the mall for her I'm trying to put this nicely, her inattention. I know she was embarrassed. I would have been too, but that's the reason why you don't look at these things when you're trying to work or you're driving an automobile. Taking unapproved shortcuts, going somewhere where you probably shouldn't go. It's quicker if I go that way though. Or being in a hurry and rushing certainly lead to trips and falls. Some of the preventions we can use is to design workplaces and processes to prevent potential exposures to slip and trip hazards. We put it in the design of the area so we reduce that possibility. Have good housekeeping, maintain clean, dry, tidy work areas free of clutter. Safe walking practices, follow safe walking practices and routes. If you have a designated route, that's how you should walk. Don't take shortcuts across. Wearing proper footwear with good traction. Most of the safety footwear, and most of you probably have to wear at some point in time, have those anti-skid soles on there, so they're in pretty good shape. Even things like Skechers, you can get them with good stuff on the bottom. Learn to fall properly. It's trying to break your fall as best you can rather than breaking yourself as you fall. But that can be a bit of an issue. You may end up having a strained wrist or something like that. May be better than a broken arm. Okay. Again, workplace design. Contain work processes to prevent discharge, splatter, or spillage of liquids, oils, particles, dust onto the floor. You can accomplish this by local ventilation, a good engineering control, extraction collection systems, enclose those activities where those things are happening so stuff doesn't just fly out into the room. Work surfaces with raised or lipped edges that can contain the spills, catch drip pans and drain offs. You can use drip trays to contain leaks of lubricant onto the floor from machinery. But you probably should also do a little investigation to figure out where it's coming from and fix it. Okay, good preventive maintenance. Use adequate ventilation to avoid smoke, steam, and condensation of water and grease onto the floor. Provide adequate lighting to keep work areas, aisles, and paths of travel well lit. If you have to have additional lighting, you certainly can use the new LED headbands with the LED lighting on it can help those situations if that is what occurs. Mark, highlight step edges and transition areas where you have change in elevations. A lot of times you'll see that black and yellow hatched areas on lips to let you know that there's a change here where you're going to have to step. Okay, use anti-skid paint, slip-resistant coatings, and strips. Again, make sure stairs have sufficient lighting and handrails. We'll talk a little bit more about them. Provide effective drainage. False floors or work platforms. Install slip-resistant floors in high-risk areas. So let's talk a little bit about the OSHA standard for walking and working surfaces, which is found in 29 CFR 1910 subpart D, and that's all I'm going to do about talking about the actual standard itself. We're going to look at some pictures and some definitions of some things here. You can see both of these situations, the employee is putting themselves in a bit of peril for where they're working. Lots of cords and hoses and things, and a wet floor over here where this gentleman is, on to the left there. Then this one is on a ladder and obviously is spraying water, hot water. So obviously that whole area is wet and the ladder itself. So there's certainly a risk, a very good risk as a matter of fact. So one of the things says the housekeeping, all places of employment clean and orderly and in a sanitary condition, where workrooms are clean and dry. Platforms, mats, or other dry standing places for wet processes. It's pretty nice that they gave this guy somewhere to stand over here. We wouldn't be standing right in the water, but then we put a pile of ice right next to him. Go figure, right? Again, in meat packing, a lot of places, I've been to both a poultry and a swine processing plant before. Neither one of them there were the greatest experiences I've ever had. They have 2 production shifts, and usually a third shift is what they call the sanitization, or the cleanup shift. And they'll coat everything that could come in contact with the meat with surfactants and spray it off with either steam or hot water or something like that to make sure there's no bacteria or anything growing in, because we don't want it on the food we eat, right? But these places are inherently pretty dangerous, and this, particularly the folks that work on these shifts. It's not that the ones that are using the knives to cut up the pieces of a chicken or whatever, they're not at risk, but certainly these folks are a whole different type of risk there. Aisle space where we have sufficient safe clearance maintained where mechanical handling equipment is used. Aisleways and passageways kept clear and in good repairs. And no obstruction across or in aisles that could create a hazard. In this picture, you notice that we have a marked exit route to that exit door. There's an exit door in the back. We did a really good work here to get all of these things wrapped and strapped like it should be. Then we go over here and we impinge upon the aisle with the material, and look at that. Do you think there's a possibility that it could fall? You betcha, it could. Again, we have a walking surface where we put a hose, and we got water, potential soap material, which will make that slick. Permanent aisles and passageways will be appropriately marked. This large open aisleway here is probably for the powered equipment that's going to be taking this product in and out of this area over here. Lift trucks and the like use that. That looks very well organized. Floor openings, every stairway floor opening guarded by a standard railing. Railing provided on all exposed sides except at the entrance to the stairway. This shows an example of that, where someone climbing up the ladder on this back side, there's a large opening here, so they step off the ladder and into that opening. Well, it says no, we need to have a gate so that whenever I'm coming from that ladder onto that mezzanine, I push that gate open, I step off in there, and when I step back, it closes behind me. It's spring-loaded. That way, no one can just accidentally step into that opening. Unless there's an offset where it means I got to go around like this to get into it, then you don't have to do that. But if you're going to enter straight off a ladder onto a mezzanine like that, you need to have some sort of gate there. Where operating conditions necessitate feeding a material into a hatchway or chute opening, protection shall be provided to prevent a person from falling through the opening. And the same thing was if you were to be on a roof and there were skylights. Skylights are typically made out of plexiglass. It gets subjected to sunlight every day. They get brittle. So you have to protect around skylights. So if somebody was to fall into the skylight, it breaks, they could go all the way down to the floor. So we have to put a guard around those. But those, as long as they're closed, everything's cool. Every pit and trapdoor floor opening and frequently used, guarded by a floor opening cover of standard strength and construction. And while the cover is not in place, the pit or trap opening constantly attended by someone or protected on all exposed sides by removable standard railings. So if you have to do something temporary where that's open, as long as you have an attendant by it to watch for people, you're good. Every temporary floor opening shall have standard railings or shall be constantly attended by someone. If you can't put railings, you can cover them. Little drainage trenches like this inside of buildings, a lot of folks have those. They put like the expanded metal grating over those so that you don't create a tripping hazard. But if you have to keep it open, you're going to have to either cover it or have someone attend it. Again, this is the kind of covering I was talking about. And you notice again, there's a bunch of stuff there that creates a situation for us from a slip trip hazards. Every floor hole in which a person can accidentally walk shall be guarded by either a standard railing with standard toe board on all exposed sides, or a floor hole cover of standard strength and construction. While the cover is not in place, the floor shall be constantly attended by someone or shall be protected by a removable standard railing. And you can see they're showing an opening there large enough. Essentially a little 2x2 opening in the floor can create a tripping hazard. So we need to not only look for large openings like that, but even little smaller ones than that too, to cover them up or identify them so people will not step in them. Every wall opening from which there is a drop of more than 4 feet shall be guarded by one of the following: a rail, a roller, a picket fence, half door or equivalent barrier. Every open-sided floor or platform 4 feet or more guarded on all open sides except where there's an entrance to a ramp, stairway, or fixed ladder. So they're allowing you to have that opening, but it has to close behind you so you don't create a situation where you step back off or somebody just steps onto it. The railing shall be provided with a toe board whenever beneath the open sides persons can pass, there's moving machinery, or there's equipment in which falling materials could create a hazard. All open-sided floors, walkways, platforms, or runways above or adjacent to dangerous equipment guarded with a standard railing and toe board. In this case, it doesn't matter whether it's 4 feet or more. It can be 3 feet, but right below it is like an auger, a conveyor belt, a vat of something. If you have that, you have to put some sort of guardrail on that, regardless of height. But in general industry, it's required. If it's 4 feet of a drop, you have to put some sort of fall protection in there, which usually is a standard railing, etc. Every flight of stairs having 4 or more risers shall be equipped with standard stair railings or standard handrails. A standard railing consists of a top rail, an intermediate rail called a mid rail, and posts. So it's 42 inches up to the top level from the floor, and halfway at 21 inches is where your mid rail should be. Top rail, smooth surface. The ends of the rail shall not constitute a projection hazard. Stair railing shall not be more than 34 inches nor less than 30 inches from the upper surface of the top rail to the surface of tread in line with the face of the riser at the forward edge of the tread. So you can see what they're showing there with the handrail is the one that goes against the wall. Stair rail goes to the open side. You notice there's a mid rail in that one as well. That's pretty much standard on stair rails and handrails if you got 4 or more risers. Wood railings, posts at least 2x4. Posts are less than or equal to 6 feet. Rails at least 2x4. Pipe railings at least 1.5 inches nominal diameter. Post space not more than 8 feet on centers. For structural steel railings, post and top and intermediate rails 2x2 by 3/8 inch angles, post space not more than 8 feet on center. So it gives you pretty standard ratings and things for what you want to do in this case. And anything that you put up that's going to be considered a rail or a fall protection has to be able to withstand a load of at least 200 pounds applied in any direction at any point on the top rail. The toe board, which goes down on the bottom, standard toe board is 4 inches in nominal vertical height. It's securely fastened. You can have a 1/4 inch gap between the toe board and the floor level. And when they come together, you can only have about a 1-inch difference between the two pieces. Typically, you don't see much of a gap going that way. You do see the gap at the floor, which is pretty much standard. That way you can sweep stuff off there if you need to. Where material is piled to such a height that a standard toe board does not provide protection, and you put paneling from the floor to the intermediate rail or to the top rail, depending on what you're putting on that, you should provide that. Fixed stairs. These are provided for regular travel between levels, where you might go and have to give certain attention to equipment or whatever on a regular basis. That's where you'd have a fixed stairs. Fixed stairs provided where access to elevations is daily. And again, for work around acids, caustic gases, or other harmful surfaces. When you see that travel up, and then you see in the middle there, abouts, you have a landing. You can only go so many feet straight up without having a landing, okay? And in this case, you can see they're going on up. They're not going excessively high, but it's going over from one area to another. So we need to have the right type of stuff. Fixed stair minimum width of 22 inches. And again, have consistent rise and run of those steps, so there's not a big difference in them, to be very uniform. Stair treads. All treads shall be reasonably slip resistant, and the nosing shall be of non-slip finish. The rise height and tread width shall be uniform throughout any flight of stairs, including any foundation structure used as one or more treads of the stairs. So as you're starting at a floor level, whether it be a laminate floor or a concrete floor, that first step needs to be consistent with everyone as they go up, okay? Stairway platforms. Stair platform shall be no less than the width of the stairway and a minimum of 30 inches in length, measured in the direction of travel. So that when you get to that, it should be a minimum of 30 inches before you have to go and start back up again. Railings and handrails. Standard railing shall be provided on the open sides of all exposed stairways and stair platforms. Handrails should be provided at least one side of the closed stairway, preferably on the right side descending. You notice in this picture, you'll see there's more than 4 steps on that, so that there's no railings on there, no handrails or no stair rails, so that needs to have those for that. All right, let's switch from that and talk about ladders. Everybody climbs a ladder from time to time, whether it be at home or at work. So one thing about ladders, OSHA requires, they use these terms frequent and periodic when they talk about inspections. The frequent means that every time you use it. Periodic may mean that somebody expects them thoroughly and documents this, that, and the other, maybe every couple months or so, but they need to show something that they're being inspected. Part of the inspection is not only the ladder itself, but those stickers. There's warning stickers on there. There's what the design use is, whether it's a type 1, type 1A, type B, type 2, etc. So we need to make sure that all parts are free from sharp edges and splinters, visually acceptable, no broken steps, no broken rivets, none of these supports here are bent. The feet will allow it to sit flat on the floor, so it's not like a teeter-totter. Step ladders, I haven't seen a 20-foot step ladder. The longest ones I've seen were 12s, but I'm sure they make them. The single ladders or extension ladders can go about 30 feet. So one of the things we want to make sure is they're maintained in good conditions at all times. The locks, wheels, pulleys frequently lubricated. That will be on the extension ladder. Because if that worn rope, as you're pulling that ladder part up and it goes up and it breaks, it's going to come down at a pretty fast rate. It could get some fingers. Safety feet and auxiliary equipment are in good shape. Ladders inspected frequently. Those with defects withdrawn from service for repair or destruction and tagged or marked dangerous do not use. If you don't have any of these fancy tags, you can get some of those long wire ties tied together and make your own one. If you throw that away, you want to make sure you destroy that so somebody can't go dumpster diving and take it out and take it home. Somebody get hurt with that ladder right there. You see where somebody's tried to repair it. And you got broken members and stuff, that support members are missing. So that's not a good ladder to use. Ladders not placed in front of door openings towards the ladder unless the door is blocked upon, locked, or guarded. We have another little problem here with the ladder. What do you see there? Yeah, he's on the top platform. And that's not permitted. As a matter of fact, you're not supposed to stand on that step or that one either. And there's a little tag on there that says do not stand on or above this step. And he's done in front of a door, so he's doubly indemnity there. Tops of the ordinary types of step ladders shall not be used as steps. Again, this is what we have here. Hey, how long does it take to go get a longer ladder? Probably a lot faster than it will be to heal from all those wounds you get from falling, right? Okay, you got the guy here, he's got all this nice area to work, except he's already hung up there inside of his cords and his hoses. Being we didn't have a lot of folks, then we got through this fairly quickly. Do you have any questions? Well, that concludes our workshop today.